We all are a unique blend of all 5 archetypes, which is based on the Chinese elements. And as you understand each one of them more deeply, I call it seeing through the matrix, because you can kind of start seeing.
Today's guest is Marni Wandner, founder and strategic consultant at Future Present, a coaching and consulting company focused on helping people in the music industry avoid burnout and work more effectively. Her approach bridges wellness and professional development and includes the 5 Archetypes framework, based on the Chinese 5 elements, which helps individuals understand themselves and collaborate better with others.
Would archetypes tend to take criticism poorly? Like, it can be hard to admit that they're wrong about something. Metal person with really, really high metal and really low water might be really hypercritical of themselves, but also others. There's a lot of self-discovery because people are understanding how they function and what their tendencies are, what their strengths are, how their strengths can become their challenges when we over-index in our strengths. People can walk away with a deeper understanding of where they get in their own way and how they can better work with each other. When we're thinking about our stress response, when we're thinking about how we handle situations, how we grow, where we want to go, we can look at it in this framework and figure out what the roadmap is for us.
It sounds really helpful, but I must admit, it sounds abstract. And in our preparation for this podcast recording, we had the idea that I would take the survey, I would send the results to you, and we would do a live assessment here on camera. I think it's about that time. What's the first step? Marni, what is Future Present?
Future Present is my company. It's a coaching and consulting company where I work with human beings behind creative fields, mostly in the music industry. It's also a concept that comes up a lot in my work, in the idea of the tension between building what's next and being in the now.
What's a typical engagement look like between you and a business in the music industry?
When I work with companies, always a little bit different, but I tend to start with a group session, a team session, where we will either be the whole company if it's a smaller company, or if it's a larger company, we might break into smaller groups. So I like to do group sessions in about 10 people max, to make them really interactive. And we'll start with a framework that I use in all of my work called the 5 Archetypes, which helps us understand each other. It helps us understand ourselves. And we'll usually use a focus: communication, burnout, stress management, collaboration, time management, things like that. And I'll facilitate team session based on these things so that people can walk away with a deeper understanding of where they get in their own way and how they can better work with each other. And then from there, we'll usually do a number of one-on-one private sessions with each person that was in that group over the course of a set amount of time, whether that's 6 months or a year. And sometimes we might reconvene and do that group session again to see how people have shifted.
Before we get into the details, what's a typical outcome that you should expect after this session and working with you?
When we do the group work, there's a lot of self-discovery, obviously, in the moment, because people are understanding how they function and what their tendencies are, what their strengths are, how their strengths can become their challenges when we over-index in our strengths. And they also very quickly start to understand each other, which is why I love doing this work in groups. I use the 5 Archetypes with my individual clients as well, but in groups, it's very powerful because the individuals in the group walk away understanding why they do what they do, but also how they can better collaborate with other people, especially the people that seemed very different from them, that maybe didn't know how to collaborate with before.
And is it collaboration amongst people who work at a specific company? Is it collaboration amongst the people who work at the company and the people who they represent? For instance, if they're artist management, it's the artists they represent. If they're a label, it's the managers, attorneys, and stuff like that.
It's mostly the people that they work with. So even if I do work with a lot of artist management companies, and in that respect, it's the people that work together, the managers, the staff, the team. But it does very much give insight into how they can better work with their clients, their artists. If it's a non-artist, if it's a marketing company or something like that, how they can work with their clients, because we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, but with the 5 Archetypes, we all are a unique blend of all 5 archetypes, which is based on the Chinese elements. And as you understand each one of them more deeply, you start to see, oh, I think that person might be primary wood or, fire or water. And that's why they communicate like this. Or maybe I should try this. So you start to understand and see it. I call it seeing through the matrix because you can kind of start seeing, how people do things and why and understand what your reaction is to that and to kind of take ownership of that. It's all about self-awareness, but the more we understand about ourselves, the more we understand how we react to the world around us, which is really the only thing we have control over. So, it helps people understand each other in the group setting that we're in, but it also helps people understand the relationship to the people in their lives, and that's doesn't stop with work. I mean, that could be their personal relationships as well.
We're going to dive into this. But before we do, I want to hear about your journey. How did you get here? We met back in 2013 when you were running a marketing agency. Next thing you know, we rekindle a couple years ago, and this is where you're at. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I can't believe we met in 2013. That's wild. Yeah, when I was running my marketing company, Sneak Attack Media, that was probably right around the time when we met, was probably right around the time when I was going through my burnout, which is kind of what really got me into this work. I had been running the company for since 2006, so however long that is, 7 years, and before that, I was at a small label. Before that, I was in artist management. Before that, I was an actor, and got into the music industry via artist management. And after running the company, I really kind of didn't know that I was burnt out, but I knew that there was something not right. I wasn't sleeping. I was really, really stressed out, but not just like, oh, this is a stressful time. It was like a motor inside of me is the best way I could describe it. And I was like fully depleted on all cylinders, mentally, physically, emotional, just like I didn't have anything more to give. And yet, like so many of us, all I knew how to do was to keep going and keep pushing. I mean, I had biggest staff I'd ever had in the tenure of running my company. I had more clients I'd ever had. I was traveling a ton, and I just kind of hit a wall. And we didn't call it burnout really in our industry then. We didn't really talk about it that much at that point either. And I started getting help. I started working with a bunch of really great integrative practitioners because I knew that it wasn't just mental, it wasn't just physical. It was like there was a lot going on, and I needed to put together the pieces. I've always been interested in like health and wellness and integrative practices anyway. So I thought this is a good place to start. And I changed a lot about my life and about how I was working. And it was a gradual process for sure. But as soon as I started feeling better, I thought I would like to help other people with this. What do I need to do in order to do that? And I came across a health coaching certification that would take a year to earn. It was an online course, so I could do it while I was running my company. And I loved it. I really fell in love with not just learning about the kind of integrative wellness practices of how to look at a whole person, including their career, but also I loved the coaching process. I really didn't understand what coaching was. I had a business coach, but I didn't really understand how that could apply to kind of other areas of your life. And I also didn't understand really how all those areas were integrated, which is really where I focus now. So once I got that certification, I started getting more in different areas. I started studying applied neuroscience and integrating that into my work. I started studying leadership development and how that can help in all different aspects, even if you're not like a traditional leader. And also the five archetypes. I got certified in that framework because I saw it really being very, very helpful in the work that I was doing and in myself.
Is this all while you're continuing to run Sneak Attack?
Most of it, yeah. While I was running Sneak Attack, I got my main health coaching certification and then a few other certifications in like gut health and a few other things like that. And then I sold the company to the syndicate. So the syndicate acquired Sneak Attack Media. I brought my team that I had at the time. They're all still there, which I love. And I love the company so much. And as I was kind of integrating into the syndicate, which was kind of when I started feeling like I could be a little bit more public about the coaching work that I was doing behind the scenes. For some reason, when I was running Sneak Attack, I didn't feel like I could be a coach as well. I felt like that would be confusing. It really wasn't until I was inside of the syndicate that I started being kind of public outwardly public facing about that and started, doing events and things like that and collaborating with other people in the space and finding the other people that were doing, wellness things in the music industry. And from there, it really became kind of a big part of what I was doing. I would see like people that used to ask me to come speak on panels about digital marketing were now asking me to speak about wellness and burnout and mental health and, all of that stuff. So it just became kind of a natural part of what I was doing. And then the pandemic hit, and I think we all started thinking a lot about what we really wanted to do, like, ultimately, and I realized that it was time for me to really pursue this full time, and I left the syndicate in 2021 and just started exploring what that meant for me in terms of building a coaching company and doing consulting in this way.
So you worked in the music business. You saw something that was broken, in this case, burnout, lack of conversation around it. You experienced that for yourself. You went out, you acquired the skill set to solve that problem for yourself, and then you went to do it full time for others. That sounds very familiar, as that's exactly what what I've done. We'll get to those similarities also later. Okay, so now you're coaching full time, focused on these Chinese elements. Let's talk about the process once you're inside the company and the folks in the company have taken the survey, and now it's time to analyze that. What happens next?
Yeah, so once everyone has taken the assessment, they have their results. Like I said, we usually start with a team session. Not always, but I find that when that's possible, it's really useful because, like I said, people are learning about themselves, but they're also learning about each other. It really does create some pretty instantaneous compassion when you understand the things that are unique about you, but that you also house these, qualities that other people have too. And you kind of understand, oh, I need more of that. And that person has a lot of that, right? It brings people together rather than separates them, which is why I really like using it with groups. And usually we'll start by just planning the session. So when is that going to happen? How many people is it? Is it virtual or in person? I'll do a lot of virtual stuff nowadays because everyone's remote. Not everyone. Sometimes I do get to go into offices, and sometimes I do get to do like offsites. Like, companies will have retreats and they'll meet in a certain place, and I'll go and I'll meet them, and they'll bring me in to do it in person, which is really fun. So we'll start there. And those sessions are really, really integrative. They're really interactive. It's not me, kind of doing a sort of lecture. It's like I'm presenting all of the information about all the different primaries and all the different archetypes and what their strengths are and where they tend to over-index and what happens when that happens. And we usually, like I said, center the session around something. So building better communication or preventing burnout or, collaboration or something like that. And so I'll plan a session with that in mind, but I'll kind of start very broad. I'm like, these are kind of some of the qualities and strengths of all the five archetypes. And then as we get into it, people are like, oh, and they start seeing themselves in all the things that we're talking about. And oh, I do that all the time. And oh, maybe I'm wood and my metal is really low. Maybe that's why I always ask so and so to look at my, proposals before I send them out because her metal is really high. And innate, and then, or, oh, we should collaborate more together because we really complement each other. Or, we start, I mean, once we get deeper and deeper into it, there's so many levels. I mean, I could talk about it a lot, and it's just one aspect of what I use in my work, but it's such a foundational part of it because it helps people understand how they can do all the other stuff they're trying to do. And it's wild to see kind of like the things that are challenging each other, right? The things that we would consider opposites, but how they need each other as well. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge to get around so that you can break through something and improve efficiency or improve communication or improve whatever it is that you're looking to do with the team and then individually. And then the individual sessions, we can dive deeper into that stuff.
It sounds really helpful, but I must admit, it sounds abstract. In our preparation for this podcast recording, we had the idea that I would take the survey, I would send the results to you, and we would do a live assessment here on camera. I think it's about that time. What's the first step?
Well, there is something that it does sound abstract, but it is very, very, very practical. And so I'm glad that we're doing this in real time because I think you're gonna see how it sounds a little like out there. And then in practice, it's like, Oh, this makes sense. So, first step is really looking at your assessment results. So, I have them in front of me. You sent them to me. I've put them in order of highest to lowest. So, I'm seeing so each one of these, right, is we have all 5, as I was saying, and we're talking about wood, fire, earth, metal, and water are the archetypes. A lot of times people ask me, "Where's air?" Because they know about, astrology or something like that. Air corresponds to metal. So, it's not like pie where you have more of one, so you have less of the other. You can actually be equal in a few of them, and sometimes that does happen. It's more like each one of them, I describe a lot of things like this, but I describe it as a mixing board, right? Where you can go all the way up and you can go all the way down on each one. Each one has their own individual channel. And so you have a percentage of each one. And then in order, the one with the highest percentage is your primary. The one with the lowest percentage is your lowest. Like I said, sometimes you can be tied for a few of them, whether those are in the middle. If they're at the top, then you're tied for primary, meaning that you have a dual primary, which we can talk about a little bit if you want. Your primary is wood. So you're a wood archetype at 77.4%. Your secondary is earth, which is 72.9%. So that's pretty close. I wouldn't say they're tied, but they're very, very close. And then behind that, we've got metal, which is 63.9%, then fire, which is 56.7%, and then water, which is 50.4%. I will say that most people are lowest in water. Water is our ability to pause, to get quiet, to listen to others, but also ourselves, to introspect, to reflect. And most of us, that's not the first thing that we'll go to. It's in us, and we have the capability, and you actually have quite good access. I would say that you're quite a balanced person because from wood to water is only about 15 percentage points, right? So, that might not be the first thing you do is think or get quiet and digest
That's
the
accurate.
information process and reply, which is most of us. But what I do see is with the wood primary, closely followed by earth, I would say that wood primaries they're big thinkers, they're strategic thinkers, they're visionaries, they're innovators, they're very often entrepreneurs are wood. They really value forward momentum and progress and achievements. They get shit done. Wood archetypes get shit done. You have the earth as a secondary, which I call it like a modifier. I would say that you're probably a person that gets shit done, but while considering how what you're trying to do affects other people. So you're going to maybe do things and create things that are for others and always be considering that. And then the metal being not too far behind the earth, I would say that you're going to not be over focused on speed where a wood person with higher wood and lower metal might just go 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 and not look at the details as much. You might be more discerning and focused on doing it kind of the right way, whatever that means to you. So, seeing that you create systems, what you're doing now, and I wanna hear what you think about this, but I'm thinking you likely require systems for yourself more for efficiency than for organizational purposes, and you're likely best at maybe creating systems that are people-centered and purpose-driven.
Okay, so if you now have me defined into these 5 archetypes, is the plan to go then educate my coworkers as to, like, who they're dealing with on that level such that they can be informed about how to interact with me during the day to get the most out of our collaborative efforts? Did I get that right?
Well, kind of, but it's not really up to me. So it would be if we were to do this work in a group, I probably wouldn't have gone that far deep into your particular thing. I would have started with, here's the strengths of a wood archetype, here's the strengths of a fire archetype, earth, metal, water, and kind of go. And then here are their challenges, and here's some things that, where they get in their own way. And then people would go, well, I'm this, and how does this, and then we can kind of dig into the specifics. With what I just did with you is a little bit more what I would do with an individual is kind of go, this is what I see. And then I would kick it back to you and say, how does that resonate? Like, how does that kind of fit into how you are as a person, specifically with what you do?
I mean, it's extremely accurate. With regards to systems, I would say that systems make me feel strong. I don't necessarily have strong systems everywhere in my life. It's not like I'm maniacal about, organizing all, everything in my sock drawer, anything along those lines. But when something's meaningful enough to me and I take the time, call it like 2 steps backwards, to set a system that's gonna allow me to go 3 steps forwards, it makes me feel really good. Like, I'll stay up all night for days on end if I'm really feeling the value of the system that I'm working on, knowing that it's gonna scale throughout the week ahead and the years and stuff like that. So, of course, that's what led me into this line of work. If I'm being honest, I probably should have been a software engineer from the start. There was no better time than in the year 2000 when I was taking computer science 101 in college, and I come home from, Thanksgiving break or whatever, and my parents ask me, "Oh, how's school going?" And I'm like, "This elective I'm taking is really cool." I'm like, "In the future, I'm learning like C++." plus plus. And I was like, "In the future, everyone's gonna have, like, their own website, and they're gonna talk to each other, and it's gonna be like the way we communicate." And this was something that I said literally out loud, and I was kinda like, it didn't have the strength and the self-confidence probably to stick with that and to follow that intuition. Of course, that ended up being right, and then 20 years go by and I'm like, I missed the boat. And then all of a sudden I find that there is actually like a way to get back on that train without having to go, back to school and learn it from the start. And that's how I ended up here. I probably would have had a very fulfilling 20 years between then and the year 2020 had I had taken this exam and understood better about myself as a 20-year-old, because I don't think I understood that about myself at the time, so but now here I am, I'm 4 years old, and I feel like I know that about myself, like, I know myself to be these things, and it's not all that much surprising based on the line of questioning in the assessment that this was the way that the chips fell for me. So, what is it that I can do with this information to make decisions about, I don't know, day-to-day interactions, but also like, quarter by quarter, year by year, and things like that, that you think I might not already be doing. Of course, if I was working at a day job and it said that I am wood, and wood aligns with entrepreneurship, then maybe the answer is like, we'll figure out a way to get out of your day job and go become an entrepreneur. But in my case, I feel like I've done that, and I'm very happy for that. It's very fulfilling for me. I feel like the risks of it was very anxiety provoking at the start, but that was many years ago. And I'm now over that, and it feels like I'm reaping the rewards from those decisions. But what is something I can do with this information now going forward?
Yeah. Well, first off, yes, like, the fact that you are adept at building things, whatever that thing is very that's wood, right? So wood is great at creating structure, metal is great at benefiting from structure. Metal needs structure to live within, makes them feel safe. You have that in you, but your primary is wood, meaning that you're good at creating that structure and building those systems, for a metal, for a metal person to either live within or work within, or other people to kind of use as they need. That's a whole other topic. So it makes sense that you would have found yourself even early on and with an interest in building things and, kind of creating that framework. If you think about building like the frame of a house, right? That's usually wood. And then kind of having that structure to go to play within in different ways depending on what your element is. But it doesn't mean that you have to be an entrepreneur, right? There's plenty of wood people working within companies. They're leading teams, they're innovating, they're running things in their own way. They're running wood people are usually the people that are just like plucked to lead something, even if it's in their personal life, right? Like they're just like, why am I always in charge? And but they kind of thrive in that way. So in terms of how you can use this moving forward, you can use it in a number of different ways. So if you notice that, you have a specific habit that you're trying to build or a habit that you're trying to break or a behavior that you're trying to break, you can look at how that shows up as in your archetypal breakdown, right? So where am I strong? Where can I use work? How do I tap more further into my lower elements to balance myself out on a daily basis? Like I said earlier, the only thing we can really control is our response to things that happen. So when we're thinking about our stress response, when we're thinking about how we handle situations, how we grow, where we want to go, we can look at it in this framework and figure out what the roadmap is for us. So what would be something for you now that you're looking to level up in or change or do or grow in?
I'm pretty good at hiding this, but the truth is, if something goes wrong, my initial reaction is to say, it's not my fault. And then after I've processed that, I usually come to the conclusion that the right thing to do is to take ownership of it and put a plan in place to fix it. And this happens in my personal life, but this also happens in my professional life. And therefore, like, I'm curious to know how that might intersect with this assessment, my personality type as based on the responses to the survey, and whether I need to be looking or reading into that any deeper so as it doesn't become a problem. I've benefited in the last, whatever, 10, 15 years of running these businesses where there hasn't been any like really big things go wrong for me. Of course, there's been some speed bumps in the road, but I fully expect that at some point there would be, and I want to be able to be prepared to handle that properly.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So, wood archetypes tend to there's all these elements in their highest expression and when they're, in a really good place in all the ways and how we express ourselves in that way. And then there's our elements, how we express ourselves when we're, just in our day to day. And maybe we're stressed, maybe we're not, maybe we need to eat, maybe whatever it is, the thing that we're not in our tip top. Most of the time we're in a place where we're reactive and struggling a little bit. In that, kind of sense, would people can tend to take criticism poorly. Like, it can be hard to admit that they're wrong about something because they've created a structure or a plan or they have a strategy and they're very sure that that's the right way to do it. And if something gets in their way or someone gets in their way, they can feel frustrated, they can feel angry and immediately kind of be not accepting. I'm not thinking of the word, but they take criticism harshly instead of, "Oh, yeah, no, that you're right. Maybe I should kind of adjust that, or maybe I didn't think that through." Right? That's also because the metal is a little bit on like lower as well. So it's kind of instead of, "Oh, yeah, that detail I did miss that." It's kind of like, "No, this is we need to like, ship it, break it, like that kind of get it out there." You're probably not in that much danger of working too quickly because you do have good access to your earth, thinking about how this affects other people and creating harmony, and also your metal where you're thinking about the details. But when that happens, that's a time to think, okay, I don't feel safe in this moment, so I'm stressed out about somebody coming at me for something that I was positive is correct. Like, the same thing might happen. You might find that you have the same reaction when somebody, like, cuts you off when you're trying to go somewhere, right? Like, it's your fault, right? So, it's kind of just that self-awareness moment of like, "Oh, here I go again. This is what I do. This is what I do. What do I actually need right now for myself to feel safe?" Which kinda quells that stress response instead of making it get higher and higher, or then it turns into, like, a bigger stress response, or then you start blaming other people for a lot of things. But it kinda helps in that moment bring us back into, "Wait a minute, let me really look at this situation from another side. What other way can I look at this? Is this my wood archetype telling me I'm right when maybe there is something else to look at?" So it's really kind of practicing. The first thing is really practicing recognizing when that response happens, whether it's at home or at work.
Practicing, recognizing when that response happens. All right, I'm going to work on it. Is there an archetype that is the opposite of that? Like, it feels to me like that's just human nature. Like, nobody wants to be criticized. Nobody wants to be told they did something wrong. Maybe that's just because that's the world I live in. But is there someone out there who's like totally comfortable being told that they did something wrong and just like understands the bigger picture and is able to kind of like move forward with that totally I don't know, affected?
Not really, but each element when they're in their, like, best place, each element at their best takes it differently, but better when any element is in a place of any kind of stress. So, a wood person that's, had a great night's sleep, had a chance to work out, ate a nutritious meal, feels on top of their game, and then someone comes up and says, "Hey, I noticed something wrong with this strategy that you created. This could be," might say, "Oh, let me take a look at that because we wanna move forward. What do we need to fix so that we move forward?" But if any of those things didn't work out for them that day, they might respond in a way or feel they should respond in a way that is more defensive. Earth might be criticized, but be more concerned with how other people are taken care of They might not say, like, be defensive or take the criticism harshly outwardly. They might agree because they don't wanna rock the boat. They wanna keep the harmony, but then they'll suffer because they wouldn't have spoken up for themselves, right? So they might take it well, but not internally. They might take it well because they wanna keep everybody happy. So that's another thing. The earth needs to kind of work on how to take criticism in a way that they're not just like they'll say it's their fault, but not external, like, they'll kinda, like, internalize it and need to work on kind of how to work on expressing themselves more outwardly, and that also depends on where their wood is in their so everything depends on kind of how low everything else is.
So Earth is my secondary. I forget if that's the way you call it. But it's a
Yeah,
close second, you said. So wood was 77, Earth was 72. And then you just mentioned that Earth, people want to make everyone else happy. I feel like I am that way. I mean, that's accurate. The fact that I'm 72 in that bucket is accurate. And
yeah,
sometimes I get myself in trouble for it. I just can't make like a fully selfish decision. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody asks me for something that I have, whether it be my seat at the ball game or something, that I'm eating or a ride to here. And it's like automatically, yes, I want to do this for you because it'll improve your life, obviously. And then it'll make you think that I'm kind. And that's really important to me. And then I know that there are people out there that feel strong in the opposite, honestly. Like I don't surround myself with a ton of those people. I don't enjoy being around those people all that much, but they exist. And like there's this movie out there, There Will Be Blood, with Daniel Day-Lewis. You might not be able to remember, but there's a scene at the end when Daniel Day-Lewis is, like, murdering somebody with his like, he's the guy, he's, like, the steel baron or something like that, like, he's the rich and famous, like, Rockefeller type, and, like, there's somebody and they're in, like, this big, living room with a fireplace, and he's just, like I think he's murdering them with his hands or something like that, and he's just, like, says something along the lines of, like, "I can't let you, like, be happy, like, I can't let you feel good at my expense, like, I have to be the one that feels good." And I'm like, "Holy shit," like, there actually are people out there that do feel that way. Of course, that's somewhat satirical, maybe not, but that's far extreme, of course. I feel like I'm on the other side, and sometimes to my detriment. Sometimes I will invite all sorts of people over at the same time that they aren't necessarily compatible with each other because I want them all to have, enjoy the experience, you know what I'm saying? But it's, like, not necessarily the right thing to do, or I might be less than stern with like an employee or someone who works for me. I might just be like easy going with them when the moment might have called more for like a little harsher kind of response or action because I don't really doesn't make me feel good to like make someone else feel bad, which is
yeah.
doesn't which sounds very obvious to me, but that's accurate. And sometimes I think I'm being very honest. Sometimes I think that in my career I would have gotten ahead faster if I was able to feel that way. And one thing you might not know about me, right before you and I met, I had just finished a 10-year career on Wall Street, essentially. So I was working in a hedge fund and I was trading credit derivatives and it was, I liked the people around me and it was fun. And then all of a sudden I'm like 7 years into my career and I'm like all of my contemporaries, guys I went to college with, people I knew from growing up who all were in the same industry started at the same exact time. They're all like way ahead of me. And by ahead of me in that career, it's clearly like how much money they're making. It's not much more than that. And I'm like, what is wrong? Like, why can't I do the things that are required in this industry to get ahead? And I think it's this, honestly. I was just like, I just don't want to make the decisions that are required in order to get ahead in this business. I think it's just not for me. And then it took me 3 years to like build up took me 3 years to like convince myself that I should actually leave. And that was the 10-year career. And then ever since then, it's been like on my own terms. I can decide how I would get ahead. I can decide who I'm working with. I can decide how I'm making money. I can decide where I'm going to be all day. For better or for worse, it started out pretty rocky, but obviously it's worked out now. So what do you have to say to that with regards to where I fall in this?
I wonder if at that time in your life, if your earth were higher, not necessarily higher than your wood, but maybe closer to it, because these things change over time, right? I mean, I don't think that we're ever gonna completely flip-flop with your lowest being our highest, but they change. I take the assessment every 6 months or so just to see, and it doesn't change wildly, but I have 2 primaries that sometimes are equal and sometimes one pulls ahead, and it depends what's going on. It depends what I've worked on. So if you were higher in Earth at that time, you still had a wood archetype there to kind of drive you forward and motivate you to achieve, but the Earth was doing the heavy lifting, and like you said, the 2 things that you said that you liked most about the job was the people that you worked with and that it was fun, right? And that you kinda it sounded like you kind of belonged in a place with people, which is really important to Earth. So, if your Earth were lower and your wood were higher, as maybe a lot of those other people that you were working with, you would have less regard for the decisions that you were making. The decisions would be a little bit more either self-serving or maybe serving, one particular client over other clients. And while Wood can see the bigger picture, Wood also values like achievements and progress and wins over everything else. And it really depends on the other elements and how high they are of how that manifests, basically. If you think of wood in nature, this is another reason I love this system is we can see these things in nature, right? You can look out our window and see how, you can look behind me and see a plant or wood can try to a plant can try to reach the sun no matter what, or it can try to reach the sun in its own way and kind of play nice with other, trees and plants in the ecosystem and offer its services in terms of food and water to other like there's different ways that a plant can grow, essentially.
Have you seen somebody's set of archetypes change dramatically over time?
Yeah, I've seen a few, and like I said, I don't think that it's like your bottom is gonna be, your lowest is gonna become your top. But yeah, there's a few people that I've been working with for a long time. And even I think I mentioned there, sometimes I'll do this with a group and then a year later they'll bring me back and I'll do it again and we'll see what's changed individually, but also with the group. So sometimes people aren't there. Sometimes there's new people. Sometimes it's a better configuration because things have been kind of figured out, not necessarily just because of this, but because of what people are learning about how they're working together. And sometimes they very often change. It's just they don't change as dramatically, like it's not like I said, your water isn't all of a sudden going to be 80%, right? But your water at 50% if you focused on things that tapped into your water archetype more and, created a practice that let you tap into it more easily, it could maybe be higher in percentage, whether it surpasses fire as your fourth archetype, I don't know. But also that takes a while, that takes practice, and it takes like any habit that you're building motivation to do that. So if your primary focus over the next year was to kind of be more introspective, be more reflective, take more pause before you respond to things, there are ways to work on that.
You said takes practice. Is this nature or nurture? Like if I'm taking this assessment as a 10-year-old, do I have, is this like the same answers as when I'm taking it as a 44-year-old, or was I nurtured somehow by my upbringing and my surroundings and my experiences to have the distribution of these archetypes that I do today?
Well, it's both because you're the one putting in the data. You're taking the assessment. It's not like a chart that's just being read for you. It's you're answering questions based on, the last 3 or so months of how you've been and how you kind of react to things and what you think in certain situations. Our brains can change over time, absolutely, and they can change because of a bunch of different circumstances, how we work on ourselves, but also like our external environments and things like that. So actually this system was created for children by a pediatrician called Stephen Cowan. He used the five archetypes to build this system for kids. And then that's how he started working with Carrie Davidson, who then built this framework for adults. So it is, if you take it as a child, let's call it a baseline, right? And then if you know this stuff about, you can't change things you don't know about. So if you know, oh, okay, my wood is this, my water is lower, these are some challenges I have in my life. This is something I want to work on. This is how I'm going to work on it. And then finding a way to work on it that's not so challenging that you'll give up on it. Over time, practicing certain things, we build new habits, we, create new neural pathways and make things that are more easily accessible for us. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, I've used to find this really hard, but now it's really easy. I also like to talk about sometimes because a lot of my work has based in kind of stress management and burnout prevention and recovery, our ledge of tolerance. So I talk about it like we have this ledge of tolerance where, we can take a certain amount of stuff, external, internal, before we fall off the ledge. And part of this work too is building resilience, which is essentially building out that ledge so that the ledge is longer. We have more path to walk on before we fall off. And so if you're starting, whether it's a young age or whether it's now, and kind of being self-aware of these kinds of things that you can change in your life, and then you put together a roadmap of how you want to change them, then you can change them for yourself.
Are certain distributions or certain assessments indicative of somebody with a longer ledge and certain with a shorter ledge? In other words, when you look at this, are you able to tell, is somebody able to handle more stress? They're able to get more towards the red line in the burnout meter, whereas somebody else might need to be way more sensitive to that earlier on?
I mean, I'd say if I see somebody where their primary is super, super high and their lowest is super, super low, and there's a big discrepancy between those, and that lowest is water, which it not always, but very often is, I might say that I would not be surprised to see that that person gets, very quickly set off. If it's earth and it's really high, I would say they wouldn't really externally get set off because their tendency would be to make everyone else around them comfortable and happy. And so they would internally take that in. And then they might even not know that they're kind of burning out or struggling because they're kind of everything's internal. Even somebody that's primary water, they might not know that they're burning out because they burn out in a different way where they kind of self-isolate and sort of hold things in. That's a whole different type of burnout. That's a non, we're not reacting and kind of, but a wood person or a metal person or a fire person might have, if their element, if their numbers are really, really high, there might be more obvious ways that they would outwardly, like a metal person with really, really high metal and really low water might be really hypercritical of themselves, but also others. And that, really overanalyze every situation. And, they might kind of fall into kind of perfectionist area and, really get too focused on the details, which can be a strength, right? Until it's not. Everything's a strength until it's not. Fire might be, really passionate and gung ho and intense and, like really, going for things and doing a lot of different things and committing to a lot of things. But they might burn out because they are afraid to, similar to earth, but different. They're afraid to kind of say no to things and people because they don't want to let people down in terms of they don't want people to be mad at them. Whereas earth doesn't want someone to think that they're unkind. Fire doesn't want people to be mad at them. That's usually how it falls. And they feel things very intensely. So they kind of can't handle physically, letting someone down. And so it might manifest that way, especially if their water is low and they don't have the capacity to like sit and think, how is this going to affect me in the future?
So it sounds like there's an element of understanding all of the potential combinations to assess compatibility amongst like myself and the people I'm around and work with. Is that
Yeah, I
something
mean,
that
I think the objective is not to like only work with people that you're compatible with. The objective is how can I work better with the people around me regardless of what
Mm,
they are. And it's always better to have a mix of different types of people because you have different perspectives, you have different strengths, and it's how do we work together really well because of those strengths instead of, well, that person frustrates me because I'm high wood, low earth and low water and I want to go fast and that person's metal and they're questioning everything about this thing that I made because they have some little tiny comments and I just want to go. I just want to finish it, right? The metal person is actually going to keep me from turning in something or sending something to a client that's got mistakes in it or it's unfinished or whatever. But the wood person is going to help the metal person push something over the line, whereas then maybe the metal person can't finish the thing and they're missing deadlines because they're still working on it, right? So we need both. It's not we can't work in like a if you had a company of just wood people, that would be a very different it's all about the balance, right? You need people in the team to kind of balance people out, but you need everyone to also understand where they could use some help balancing and instead of just my way is the right way, get out get out of my way, or no, I want to spend time in the details, or no, we have to do this as a group, which would make a wood person well, a lot of these elements would be like, oh, I don't know if we need to do everything in a group. And an earth person wants to do everything in a group, right? So it's all about balance in all the different ways, and it's a constant process, and it's constantly learning about yourself and what you need, and also kind of being aware of other people's. But the reason that this is so great in a group is because it's not always just up to you to know how to be with other people, and it's not up to you to communicate what you need. This creates like a shared language for people, so they just start understanding it. Like, oh yeah, okay, this person maybe needs an emoji in my Slack when I send it, so that they know that I'm not mad, or the reason or understanding. Oh, that person's not sending me emoji not because they're mad at me, but because they're wood and they're just trying to get something done. You know.
Okay, so now we're talking about perspective because I've always felt that perspective was everything. So, like, my ability to kind of deliver services to people in all walks of the music business, I feel like is aided by the fact that I've had many perspectives on this industry, from concert promoter to blogger to artist manager to, marketer to record label owner and stuff like that. And I'm able to say, okay, well, if I'm talking to an agent, this is what they're sensitive about. If I'm talking to an artist, this is what they're sensitive about. Talking to a marketing person, digital A&R, business affairs, whatever it may be. And now we're adding this other layer where you come in, you do the assessments for the company. Now, does everybody come away with like a sheet that tells them what everyone else is, so that if they're in a moment where they're needing to kind of send that Slack message or interact with somebody in a way, or decide whether they're going to follow up twice in the same day, or give them some space to breathe, or maybe walk over to their office and tap them on the shoulder instead, or something like that, that they're able to kind of like use this perspective to help make those decisions to improve the overall, orchestration of work at the company?
Yeah, I mean, usually I'll say, feel free to share your results with other people or even just your primary with other people, specifically on your immediate team. But it's not like a stamp of like, well, now I'm a fire person, so everyone has to treat me like this. It's more just like a building block of awareness of kind of like, okay, now I know. This is why I like doing this work in groups of like 10 or 12 and not huge, enormous groups, because even if in a bigger company, I'll do it like team by team so that everyone can kind of digest it with the people that they work with mostly. But yeah, I mean, the awareness of what other people are, their makeup is super useful. It's just not, it doesn't need to be a dividing thing. It needs to be something that brings people together. So usually it's like, oh, I work very closely with this person. This is really good information for me to know about them, but it's really good information for me to know my thing about me, of like, what can I take control of here? I'm not going to change this other person and they're not going to change me. But if there's something that I need to strengthen about myself or something that I need to work on with myself, I can see, oh, this is why I'm challenged by this person. And this is where the opportunities are for us to work better together.
What happens in these sessions beyond discussions about these archetypes? I know there's got to be more to it.
Oh yeah, this is like the baseline. And then, the coaching is kind of and even the consulting, even clients that I do consulting for, whether I'm helping them build a business or build their career. I work with some artists where I'm, kind of helping them build their career in different ways. But this is the baseline. This is helps me understand what their strengths are, but also what's challenging for them in terms of helping them with whether we're working on their health and wellness, which sometimes we are, or whether we're working with them to develop leadership skills or, get a new position in the company or get a new job or, whatever kind of transition they're in, whatever they're trying to do. The work actually spans a lot of different it looks a lot of different ways, but basically what I'm focused on is how can I always describe the coaching as like you're looking for something, it's in your house. My job is to go with you and find it and shine a flashlight in the corners of where it might be and help you find it. Like I said, it could be how to have more energy throughout the day, how to, manage stress better, how to communicate better, how to find a new role or something like that. It could be building confidence. It could be, breaking the patterns and the stories that we tell ourselves or breaking through a mental block. But it all kind of comes back to the base of who am I and why do I do what I do? And then how do I use this information and other information, obviously, to get you out of your own way, and help you understand yourself better so that you can achieve the goals you want to achieve and really kind of keep yourself out of trouble with yourself. That's kind of the gist of it.
Let's talk about energy management. What's an example of advice you've given to somebody who consistently lacks energy throughout the day, or otherwise kind of needs to be able to manage that better?
Yeah, I see that a lot. I mean, obviously, starting with the archetypes, I can see kind of where they're probably giving too much energy, but my job is to help them see that. So we might do like an energy audit. So we might talk about where throughout the day, week, month, are you giving energy? What things give you energy? What things take your energy? Where do we find what I call energy leaks, where we're not even aware that we're leaking energy and then we're exhausted and and there's also so many ways to do that, right? It's mental, physical, emotional, sensory, creative energy. We have all these different types of energy, and that means that we have all these types of ways that we need to restore our energy. So I look at things in terms of like almost how athletes manage their energy throughout a game. So we'll look at where the energy is going and kind of do like a credit debit analysis and see what's happening with the energy, and then we'll build in strategic recovery. So how can you top up your energy as you go so that you're never in a severe deficit, that you don't have to wait until you're completely depleted of whatever energy it is that you're always missing at the end of every day, every week, every month. And that's where you're in danger of going into burnout. So how do we manage that before it happens and build in these strategic recovery, you know, exercises or techniques, things throughout the day that feel sustainable to you, but actually can sustain you for the long haul. And that depends on the archetype, but it also depends on your lifestyle and kind of, what's doable for you.
Okay, so presumably we're not talking about like go take a nap or go drink a cup of coffee or whatever, but like the things that you said drain your energy. When the first thing that comes to mind for me in this industry is like a meeting, like a physical meeting, right? So every Monday you got to get into the all hands, hour, 2 hours, whatever, and we go person by person and we dump all the data from our heads into the room, and everybody kind of collectively walks away with it. But then as soon as we leave that room, all that information's outdated anyway because something could change and we don't meet again until next week. And then we're tapping each other on the shoulder all week to confirm if the information we heard from the Monday meeting's correct because we got to take action on it, but we don't have a way to actually know whether it's correct or not because it lives in someone else's silo. That feels like the same thing that we solve for at Relational, where we're developing systems, albeit they seem and look and feel different than the systems that you're implementing, to make sure that that doesn't happen, that people's energy levels are not drained from that experience, and that they're in fewer of those meetings. They're getting tapped on the shoulder fewer times because people are empowered to be able to make those or observe those things, observe that data, have confidence that it's accurate, and then make decisions on their own without having to, using a popular music industry term, be in the constant state of a fire drill. Is that what you're talking about as far as like when you talk to someone about their energy management, do they usually come to you and say, "Oh, well, I hate being in meetings or I hate and entering data multiple times, or like duplicating my efforts and stuff like that?" Is that what we're talking about?
It could be, or it could be, certain people that they get drained by or that drain their energy. It could be people that they don't see enough of that fuel them with energy. It could be activities that they do. It could be actual, like what we would call wellness techniques. Like we will look at how they're sleeping and we will look at, what they're eating and things like that if it makes sense. And if there's things that can be tweaked there, we'll talk about them. But it all comes back to systems. I mean, it's like if you don't have a system for making sure that you exercise or, prepare yourself to for how you're gonna eat for the week or have a routine for winding down. It's not just like, okay, we're gonna sleep now, right? So there's all these kinds of systems that can be built in. Some people are more amenable to them and like a system and want a system. Some people you have to kind of figure out what works for them because they are not opposed to systems, but they need a different type of system, whether they need variety, and so you can't just say, "Oh, just do the same thing every day," or "Just meal prep," or "Just do this," or "Just arrange your day where all of your calls are at this time during the day," and just do it's you have to look at each person individually and see what's pulling too much energy from them, what's pulling a normal amount for what that thing is, and then where are they replenishing that, or are they replenishing it? Is that not what happens? So there's a lot of crossover with what you do and what I do because we're looking at the whole thing and helping the person, the client, see the whole thing. I'm not doing the audit. We're doing it together. And you're probably doing the same thing where you're like looking at everything. And so they're going, oh, I see. This is the thing that is a problem. Now, how do we fix that? And then that's so it's like part one is identifying where the problem is. And part two is kind of like, okay, great. Well, what do we do about it? How are we going to fix it? What system works that feels like it's sustainable and doable for me, but it's not so much of a challenge that I'm going to give up on it after a week.
How long does the process take when you come into a mid-sized company and run this exercise?
I mean, it depends on what the goals are. It depends on the engagement. Usually we'll do an hour and a half session per like 10, 12 people. And then it could be a few months to a year of, doing individual sessions with people. It really depends on how many people are involved and what needs to change.
And what's
And then personally, like individually, I could work with people for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months.
and what's the best possible outcome? Like, what's a case study where something happened along this journey and it just transformed the company to achieve blank?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to someone earlier or last week that they were they had two parts of their business and they were trying to grow one of the parts of the business, and we kind of caught up and where they are now. They're ready to grow even further, so we're talking about kind of re-engaging, but they were able to make some adjustments within the business in terms of who's doing what and reassigning some different types of projects to people that were better suited for them so that they could actually grow in the directions they were looking to grow. They brought on more people to do the thing that like they have a management company and a marketing company. They brought on more managers so that the person, the leader of the company wasn't stuck in the weeds where he didn't want to be stuck in the weeds. He wanted to be growing and building the business. So he was able to kind of bring on people that were handling those things that he didn't want to handle anymore. And he was able to move in more of a strategy role, which is his strong point. So that I saw, a ton of that's just one example of kind of a whole company being going in the direction that someone wanted it to go and getting everyone on board and getting everyone bought in because he was able to understand what people's strengths were and how to best make, can keep people not just engaged, but also like doing what they wanted to do so that they could keep doing it and empower themselves to kinda keep going in that direction. I don't know if that's too vague. I'm trying not
No,
to
that's not vague. I mean,
keep
of course, you're
confidentiality.
not going to tell us like names and stuff like that, but I'm trying to like draw a parallel into my life. I've witnessed, I should say, very closely firsthand integration in the music business. So, what are we? We're all just part of a major label at the end of the day. Like, you have success, you're going to end up probably folding into a major label at some point, somehow, or major whatever company. But that integration process is, like, not guaranteed, like, you've got 50 employees at your record label, you've got a ton of success, you're independent, and all of a sudden a major wants to buy you, and then they expect that, like, all the employees are just gonna fold into, like, the corporate structure that you've got, and it's hard, and I witnessed that, at least at first, in the example that I'm thinking of, but had they had this I was really close to it. Had we had this, I think that it would've potentially gone better, if I'm being very honest. Is that the type of thing is that like your vision? Like, come in, there's like a acquisition, there's an integration issue. We need to like understand the people that are joining, how they operate, and then the people that they are becoming a part of, and how we can make this kind of work.
Yeah, I think that's like an ideal situation. I mean, ideal, you'd know that beforehand, but yeah, if you're I mean, there's so much of that happening everywhere, but also specifically in the music industry of just, these consolidations and acquisitions and companies combining together. And I think this work is very necessary to kind of understand like who are the people, but have the people understand themselves and actually understand how to get the support for themselves that they need. But how are you going to support the people to, increase retention and engagement and really keep everyone healthy and happy, but not in like a wishy, like a squishy way, not like an every is, let's do goat yoga in the middle of the day. Like that's fun, but well, how are you really supporting the health and the happiness of everybody individually at scale? So I think this kind of helps to do it at scale where you're giving the reins back to the people, the individuals, but they have enough information about themselves and other people to grow in their own ways and be supported the way they need to be and even ask for support in the way they need, the way they might not have realized.
Well, I'm positive that there's a senior vice president of a major record label out there that's made it this far into the interview, and they're just, they've listened to the entire way, and they're ready to reach out to you. So let's tell us, how do they get in touch?
Sure. My website is futurepresentco.com. My email is marnie@futurepresentco.com. And you can find me on Instagram at futurepresentco or my name, Marni Wandner.
Excellent. I'm going to put all that in the show notes. This has been really helpful. I think it's going to prove to be something that does change the way that I approach my own relationships inside the business. And well, maybe we'll do a 6-month check-in to see if that happened.
That
Thanks for
would be awesome. Yeah, that'd be
thanks
really fun.
thanks for coming on, Marnie.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.